All right, so in this explainer, we're going to dig deep into the academic work, A Companion to the Classical Greek World. We're going to move past the popular myths and really get into the nitty-gritty, the complex realities of this foundational era. And we're starting with its most famous idea.
Just take a look at this, the Doryphoros, or spear bearer. I mean, it's pretty much the poster child for the classical ideal, right? It just screams harmony, balance, this perfect vision of what a human could be. But it makes you wonder, what kind of world could actually produce something like this? That's the big question we're tackling.
So first, we've got to really unpack the word classical itself. It's a term we throw around all the time, but its real meaning? Well, it's way more powerful than you might think, and it has absolutely shaped how the Western world sees its own past.
And here's the crucial part. Classical isn't just a simple label for a time period. Nope, it's a value judgment. It says that the 5th and 4th centuries BCE were the absolute peak, the gold standard in art, politics, you name it, that everything else gets measured against. So it's both a moment in history and a timeless, perfect ideal.
Now, what's so fascinating here is how you can map that ideal onto a real-world timeline. You see how these artistic periods, early, high, and late classical, line up perfectly with these massive political upheavals. The victory over Persia kicks off the early period. The super-destructive Peloponnesian War, that defines the high classical era. See, this art wasn't happening in some bubble.
And this is where the rubber really meets the road, financially speaking. The Parthenon, probably the ultimate symbol of that classical ideal, wasn't just built on artistic genius. It was paid for, directly, by money that Athens basically squeezed out of its naval empire. So that beautiful ideal, it had a very real and, let's be honest, very coercive financial engine behind it.
And that imperial power, well, it points to a much darker reality. Because behind all the incredible artistic achievement of the so-called classical age wasn't some era of peace and tranquility. It was an age defined by near-constant, brutal warfare.
So this brings us to the central paradox, the big contradiction of the classical Greek world. How in the world do you square the philosophy of Plato and the beauty of the Acropolis with a reality of endless war? Well, the answer is actually baked into the very structure of their political world. You see, the Greek city-states, the poli, they were caught in this impossible political trap. They were all chasing three things that you just couldn't have all at once: dominance, independence, and peace. Think about it. You could have independence and peace, but then you couldn't dominate anyone. You could have dominance and peace, but only by crushing everyone else's freedom. This basic conflict made any kind of lasting peace pretty much impossible. And don't for a second think this was just Athens versus Sparta. That's the simple story. The reality? The Greek world was this incredibly complex web of over 1,000 independent states, and every single one of them was fiercely protective of its freedom. It was a political tinderbox, and fights could break out anywhere, at any time.
And over this period, war itself got nastier. It changed from these short, seasonal dust-ups between citizen farmers into a year-round professional business fought by hired mercenaries and ambitious generals. War became less about defending your farm and way more about projecting power, which made it so much more drawn out and deadly.
Okay, so we've seen the beautiful ideal and the constant conflict, but what was holding all this together? What was the economic and social foundation? I mean, who paid for all the temples and the wars? And whose work, whose labor made it all possible? 1,000 talents. At its absolute peak, this was the yearly income of the Athenian Empire. Now, to give you some perspective, a single talent was a huge amount of silver. It was enough to pay a warship's crew of 200 rowers for a whole month. This was the staggering wealth that fueled Athens' golden age. And where did all this cash come from? Well, a bunch of places. The biggest chunk, for sure, was tribute forced on their so-called allies. But Athens also made a killing from trade taxes, from its state-owned silver mines, which, by the way, were worked by enslaved people, and from taxes on the foreign residents who were crucial to their economy. It was an economy built on extraction, plain and simple. And you absolutely cannot talk about the Greek economy without talking about slavery. And I don't think there's a more chilling definition than this one, right here, from Aristotle. For him, and for his whole society, slavery wasn't some unfortunate thing, it was the natural order of the world. The entire classical world, its economy, its culture, its famous democracy, it was all built on the backs of enslaved people.
Now, what about the women? Well, their lives were anything but uniform. Just look at this comparison, it's wild. In democratic Athens, a woman's place was completely in the home, to be unseen and unheard.
But in militaristic Sparta, women got physical training, they could actually own land, and they were expected to be sharp and assertive. It's such a powerful reminder that there was no single Greek experience.
So all of this brings us to the deep and, often pretty uncomfortable contradictions that are right at the very heart of the classical Greek world.
When you get right down to it, you just can't separate the shining achievements from the brutal realities. The birth of democracy is tangled up with imperial power. The incredible philosophical leaps of Plato and Aristotle happened in a society that ran on slavery. The breathtaking beauty of the Parthenon existed alongside the total subjugation of women.
And maybe no single object captures this whole contradiction better than this: the trireme. This worship was the engine of Athenian democracy. It was powered by the city's poorest citizens, who got political power because they served as rowers. And yet, at the same time, it was the main instrument of imperial terror, used to collect tribute and force Athens' will on everybody else. It's democracy and domination, all in one single vessel.
So that leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't it? The legacy of classical Greece isn't some simple, clean inheritance of just beauty and wisdom. It is complex, it's contradictory, and it is challenging. And maybe understanding that contradiction is the very first step to truly understanding the world they built and its deep, complicated influence on our own.